I know a lot of folks lost their lives here, and I would really, really want to communicate with you. Give me a sign that you are here.
Weird singing going on in those woods.
Just birds, mate, just birds.
Get ready to step into a world where calm hiking paths, forgotten campsites, and even quiet desert landscapes can transform into something far more disturbing in just a matter of seconds. Watch carefully, because what you're about to see might stay with you long after the video ends. On November 16th, 2025, Lewis uploaded a video to his outdoor YouTube channel. The plan seemed simple. Take his friend William, who had never camped in the wilderness before, hang up a couple of hammocks, and spend a peaceful night outside. But almost immediately after arriving, the trip began to take an unexpected turn. Lewis and William entered the woods at around 3:30 in the afternoon. With daylight already starting to fade, the ground was wet and muddy from recent rain, and a few dog walkers were still passing through the area. As they walked deeper into the forest, they searched for a quiet place to set up camp. After wandering for a while, they found a small cluster of trees surrounded by open ground. It was secluded and calm, good enough for the night. But setting up camp wasn't as easy as they expected. The tarp had to be adjusted multiple times, knots needed tightening, and rain hitting the branches above made it sound as if the forest itself was constantly shifting. To make things worse, Lewis later realized that the new audio adapter he had attached to his camera wasn't working properly. Much of the audio from the night came out distorted or completely unusable, unfortunate for a trip where a lot ended up happening. Eventually, the hammocks were set up. They cooked some food over the fire and tried to relax. That's when the forest started becoming noticeably louder.
Bro, can you hear that? Yeah.
Scary, is it?
Mate, people probably say that it's haunted just because of the screeching noise.
Yeah, really. A boar. A wild boar.
They began hearing scratching noises somewhere nearby. Owls called repeatedly in the darkness, and occasionally a loud scream echoed through the trees, likely foxes, but unsettling nonetheless when heard at night.
Whoa.
Each time a branch snapped, both of them instinctively stopped talking and listened. As the night continued, the sounds only seemed to grow stranger. The rest of the evening followed a similar pattern. Owls hooted in the distance, random screeches echoed through the woods, and leaves rustled unpredictably nearby, while their fire slowly burned out. With how active the forest was, it was easy to understand why some locals considered the place haunted. Morning arrived with thick fog drifting between the trees. Everything was soaked with moisture, the fire had completely died, and the campsite looked like a muddy mess. Birds chirped overhead, while a fox barked somewhere in the brush. Their gear looked as if it had been dragged through a swamp. Not wanting to stay longer than necessary, they packed up early, cleaned what they could, dismantled the fire pit, and began heading back toward the van. What was meant to be a quiet overnight trip had turned into a night filled with far more strange sounds than they expected. On February 22, 2025, Jaime uploaded a new video to his bikepacking and outdoor channel. He assumed it would be another routine overnight stop, just him, his van, and a peaceful place to cook dinner and relax. Instead, the evening would turn out much stranger than he anticipated. The night began with Jaime driving around Norfolk looking for somewhere suitable to park. Eventually, he settled on a backup location off Petter's Way. By that time, it was already raining and darkness was setting in, one of those evenings where everything feels slightly off. He wasn't particularly fond of the location, but he was tired of driving. The plan was simple: stop for the night, make some tea, and see how things felt. That's when the strange noises started.
I don't know what the hell's going on tonight. I can hear all sorts of weird singing going on in those woods. I think I'm gonna cook my tea and fuck off.
From the woods beside his van, he began hearing unusual sounds. high-pitched calls, and what almost sounded like distant singing. It didn't resemble wind, and it certainly didn't sound like any animal he could identify. The noises were close enough to catch his attention, but still too far away to clearly understand. Curiosity eventually got the better of him. He locked up the van, grabbed his keys, and cautiously walked toward the trees. But after only a few steps, he hesitated. Something about the atmosphere didn't feel right. After reconsidering, he decided it might be better not to find out what was making the sounds, and headed back toward the van. Later that night, after setting up his bed inside, he stepped outside briefly to relieve himself. That's when he noticed something else.
Just got out of the van to have a piss. What the fuck is that?
In the darkness of the woods, a small light appeared, slowly moving between the trees. It wasn't a reflection, and it wasn't a star. It was clearly a light source shifting through the forest. There were no other vehicles nearby, and he hadn't seen another person all evening. That was enough for him. He quickly got back into the van and stayed there for the rest of the night. Early the next morning, he packed up and left the area without looking back. On the Creepy Travels channel, most of the creator's content usually features simple overnight adventures in the remote areas of the Cumberland Plateau. But this particular trip quickly took an unexpected turn. On December 8th, 2025, the creator originally planned to spend the night sleeping inside his car. However, after noticing that his hammock was still in the back, he decided it would be better to hike down toward a nearby creek and set up camp there instead of staying by the roadside. But the moment he stepped onto the trail, a loud scream echoed from somewhere deeper in the woods.
I can't believe somebody screamed as soon as we walked down the trail. Wow. Huh.
The sudden sound made him freeze. Only a few minutes earlier, a car had been leaving the area as he arrived, which was unusual considering how isolated the location was. He tried to brush it off and continued down the trail, though he mentioned more than once that encountering anyone in a place this remote felt strange. As he searched for two strong trees to hang his hammock, he began noticing remnants of what used to be a private campground. Old metal chair frames, abandoned backpacks, and scattered debris were spread across the ground. The place had clearly been deserted for years. Eventually, he found two suitable trees and hung up the hammock, joking about his professional setup skills before settling into camp. For a brief moment, everything seemed calm. Then something unexpected caught his attention. In the distance, near a rocky bluff, he thought he saw someone moving.
Yes, that car come back. It's where you park at, walk down, is way out that way, but I just saw some at that rock bluff right there.
It looked like a person wearing a black shirt, the same detail he remembered about the man who had been in the car leaving earlier. The possibility that the same person had returned crossed his mind. The thought felt strange, but he tried not to dwell on it and focused on finishing his camp setup. Before going to sleep, he walked around the abandoned campground to show the layout of the old site. He pointed out collapsed tents, rusted sinks, and the remains of what once looked like a small bridge. He explained where the shower area used to be, where campers had pitched their tents, and why the location had eventually been abandoned. According to one story he mentioned, a former camper had once woken up in the middle of the night to something touching his foot through the open zipper of his tent. After that incident, people reportedly stopped using the campground entirely. By the time he finally went to bed, the area had become quiet again. He expected a light sleep, mostly listening for the usual sounds of the forest, but around 3:23 in the morning, he suddenly woke up. From the darkness around the creek, he heard movement in the water and the snapping of branches nearby. It sounded like something or someone was moving through the area. The noises weren't constant, but they happened just often enough to keep him alert. Each rustle in the leaves or crack of a branch made him tense up. wondering what might be moving around in the darkness. He mentioned that deer usually didn't make him feel uneasy, but whatever had been moving around that night gave him a very different feeling.